The Duggar family has always lived in the public eye. From the early days of 19 kids and counting to their many ups and downs, fans have followed the family's triumphs and tragedies. But for the Duggars, there is one chapter of their story that remains the most painful: the terrifying, life-threatening ordeal of their youngest daughter, Josie Brooklyn Duggar. Josie's arrival was supposed to be a joyful celebration, the 19th child of Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar, born into a bustling household filled with siblings and love. Instead, her birth became one of the darkest days the family has ever faced. The day that changed everything. On December 10th, 2009, Michelle Duggar was just 25 weeks into her pregnancy when she was rushed to the hospital with life-threatening complications. Fans who had grown used to seeing Michelle's glowing pregnancies on television were shocked to learn that this time was very different. The doctors acted quickly. Michelle's health was failing, and the baby's life hung by a thread. Within hours, Josie was delivered by emergency C-section, weighing a tiny 1 pound 6 ounces. She was so small she could fit into the palm of Jim Bob's hand, one family member later recalled. Her skin was translucent, and the doctors warned us not to expect her to make it through the night. For the Duggars, who had built their lives around faith and family, that night became one of desperate prayer and agonizing fear. The NICU battle. Josie was immediately rushed into the neonatal intensive care unit. Machines beeped and hissed as they kept her fragile body alive. Tubes and wires seemed to cover her, and for Michelle, the sight of her tiny daughter fighting for each breath was almost too much to bear. I remember crying and asking God, please let her live, Michelle later said. I couldn't imagine losing her. Jim Bob stood by his wife, holding her hand, though his face betrayed the same fear. He knew the odds. Babies born at 25 weeks often faced devastating health challenges or did not survive at all. The Duggar children, used to a home full of laughter and noise, now faced the silence of waiting. The older siblings took turns helping at home while others kept vigil at the hospital. Even little siblings who couldn't fully grasp what was happening sensed the heaviness in the air. A family brought to its knees. For weeks, the Duggars lived between hope and despair. One day, the doctors would report small progress, Josie's lungs responding, her weight increasing by a few precious ounces. The next day brought terrifying setbacks, infections, breathing problems, and emergency interventions. Every time the phone rang, I thought it was the hospital calling to tell us she was gone, Jill Duggar later admitted. The family prayed constantly, in the hospital chapel, at the kitchen table, even in front of TV cameras that had once captured their happiest moments. The Duggars cried out together for Josie's survival. Fans around the world joined in, sending letters, cards, and messages of encouragement. Strangers became prayer warriors, and the family felt the weight of that support in their darkest moments. The saddest day. Though Josie eventually survived, the Duggars often looked back on one day in particular as the saddest of all. It was a cold winter morning when the doctors warned Jim Bob and Michelle that Josie's body was shutting down. She was fading, Michelle recalled with tears. Her heart rate dropped and alarms were going off everywhere. I thought, this is it. We're going to lose her. Jim Bob tried to stay strong, but he broke down in the hallway, sobbing as his children gathered around him. All I could think was, how do I tell the others? How do I explain that their baby sister isn't coming home? The family clung together, praying louder than ever, their tears soaking the hospital floor. That day felt like a funeral before the fact. the weight of impending loss crushing their hearts. But then, miraculously, Josie rallied. Her heart stabilized, her tiny chest rose and fell again, and the doctors, stunned, told the family she had survived yet another crisis. Living with fragility. Even after Josie pulled through those early months, her struggles were not over. She faced years of delicate health, frequent hospital visits, seizures, and growth delays. Each setback reminded the Duggars of how close they had come to losing her. Every time she cried, every time she coughed, I worried it was the end. But then she would smile, and I'd remember why we kept fighting. For the siblings, Josie became both a sister and a miracle. They showered her with affection, aware that every moment was precious. She taught us all about the fragility of life and about how strong love can be, Jessa once shared. The Duggar faith tested. The Duggars have always been outspoken about their Christian faith, but Josie's ordeal tested them like never before. Faith isn't really faith until it's tested, Jim Bob explained. We had to trust God with her life, even when it looked like he might take her from us. Fans who followed the story saw not just a family on TV, but a family brought low, vulnerable, and raw. Their prayers, their tears, and their desperate hope turned Josie's struggle into something that resonated with thousands of families that had faced their own NICU nightmares. Looking back years later, today, Josie Duggar is a lively young girl, full of energy and joy. But for her family, the memory of those early days has never faded. In a rare family interview, Michelle grew emotional when asked about Josie's birth. She said, "It still makes me cry." She said softly, "The doctor said she might not survive, and I'll never forget the pain of almost losing her. That was the saddest day of my life." Jim Bob, sitting beside her, nodded. But it was also the day we saw God's hand the clearest. We came so close to saying goodbye, and yet we were given the gift of more time. The siblings, too, cheer up when they recall those days. Jana described sitting by Josie's incubator, whispering promises that she would always protect her baby sister. She said, "I was old enough to understand that we might lose her, but I also felt a peace that we were exactly where we were meant to be." A story that still inspires. For Duggar fans, Josie's survival has become one of the most powerful parts of the family's legacy. Her story is shared not just as a reminder of sadness, but as a testimony of hope against the odds. Countless parents of premature babies have reached out to Michelle and Jim Bob over the years, saying Josie's journey gave them strength. One mother wrote, "We didn't feel so alone because of her. If Josie could fight through it, so could our baby." The Duggars, humbled by that impact, often say they never expected their private heartbreak to become a public beacon. Yet the story of Josie's near-death struggle has continued to touch lives around the globe. Conclusion. Tears and gratitude. Reliving Josie's near-death struggle is never easy for the Duggars. Tears still flow when they talk about that darkest day, when alarms blared and hope seemed lost. The sadness of almost losing their miracle baby will always be etched into their hearts. But woven into that sadness is gratitude. Gratitude that Josie survived, gratitude for the lessons her tiny life taught them, and gratitude for every day since. The saddest day of our lives turned into one of the greatest testimonies of God's mercy, Michelle reflected. We don't take a single moment with Josie for granted. For the Duggars, the memory of Josie's fragile start is both a wound and a gift. It reminds them of what they almost lost and of the miracle they still hold close.